clarification.
We're going to start in a few minutes.
He's like,
On your way out tonight, the court spent a lot of time in developing maps and flood protection system, and other bits of information. So please, on your way out tonight, take some time to look over the maps. And also, there's some literature there for you to take home. Please take that home with you, look at it, and if you have any questions on it, feel free to give me a phone call, give me an email, and we can start that discussion. My name is Chris Bellman. I'm the Executive Director of the Luzerne County Flood Protection System. And I wish to extend a thank you to all of our guests in attendance tonight to hear about the updated flood hazards on the Susquehanna River and its impact on the Levee Valley flood protection system. I would also like to thank my friends and colleagues at the United States Army Corps of Engineers, Baltimore District, and with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Region 3, who have consumed thousands of hours in performing this evaluation, crafting this presentation, and for making the trip up here to Northeast Pennsylvania. Before we start, a little bit of housekeeping, please. I respectfully request that you please place your cell phone on silent mode or turn off. Also, I also request that you please hold all questions until the end of the PowerPoint slides. At the end, we'll have a question and answer session, so you have an opportunity to raise any concerns or comments that you may have. Our first speaker tonight is Colonel Trey Jordan, who became the commander of the United States Army Corps of Engineers, Baltimore District in July 2012. The Baltimore District's team of more than 1,200 employees manage a multi-billion-dollar program including military construction, civil works, and international interagency and emergency support. The district provides planning, design, engineering, construction, environmental contracting, and real estate expertise to a host of projects and customers in the Mid-Atlantic states, overseas, and across the Susquehanna, Potomac, and Chesapeake Bay watersheds. Colonel Jordan has served twice with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, most recently as commander of the Europe District in Weisbaden, Germany, and formerly as commander of the Charleston District in Charleston, South Carolina. In between his two Corps commands, Colonel Jordan has served as Division Engineer of the 1st Armored Division, Weisbaden, Germany, and U.S. Division Center, Baghdad, Iraq. I'm very pleased and honored that Colonel Jordan is with us tonight. Please welcome Colonel Trey Jordan.
Thanks very much, Chris, and welcome everybody to tonight's session. We did a session like this last night, and we're going to do the same sort of thing, obviously probably some different questions. It's really an honor to command a Corps of Engineer district. The Baltimore district is huge. On the civil works side, it's responsible for the entire Susquehanna River Basin, Potomac River Basin, and the northern half of the Chesapeake Bay. On the Susquehanna River Basin itself, and you'll see some of these tonight, we have 14 dams, and we have literally hundreds of miles of levee that we built and still maintain, or is in our levee inspection program, and we assist with federal funding should storms happen and the levees get damaged during those storms. It's an awesome responsibility to think about if a Hurricane Lee comes again, or a Hurricane Agnes comes again, that I now have 14 dams that I can close the gates and try to mitigate the flows downstream, that there are levee systems that are holding the water back in. This all wouldn't be possible without the cooperation and the camaraderie that we have with the local towns, with the state, with agencies like Chris's, and with FEMA. We all work together towards a common cause to make sure that you are protected as we can make you with the federal dollars that are available. With that, we built this levee system, the Wyoming Valley levee system, which has 3 separate levees in it, back in actually the 60s. And then we raised it after Hurricane Agnes. It took a few years to get the project approved and funded, designed, and built. We raised it in the 90s. And I'm happy to report that we inspected it, we inspect it regularly, and we assessed it in 2013. And structurally, this levee system is very, very sound. In fact, if you go back to the Tropical Storm Lee, it held. It held some places the water was up almost within 6 inches of the top. Other places it was a couple of feet or 3 feet from the top. And it held, and it is still structurally sound. If the water rises to that level again, I'm happy to stand on the other side of the levee, and I'm not afraid of the levee breaking and leaking. There have been some things that have changed, though. tonight, Harvey Johnson, my chief of my civil works branch and my engineering division, is going to talk to you about some of the things that have changed. One of them being climate. And while you may disagree or differ what you read in the print and hear in the news about what climate change is, what you can't argue with are the facts of what's happened in the past. And Harvey's going to talk a little bit statistically about the number of high rain events, high flow events that have happened since we designed the levees, the raising after 1972, and what that is doing to the likelihood of the river rising up so high that it might crest over or near crest parts of the levee. We still maintain, the Corps of Engineers maintains that it can handle a 100-year flood. And now there's a factor that Harvey will talk about, that freeboard, the amount of if you will, safety zone that you have between the top of the levee. 6 inches is not that's where my FEMA brother is going to come in and talk to you about what that means from a FEMA perspective. What is the risk of flooding, and how does that translate into potential impacts to flood insurance, either nationally or he's got some speculation about what might happen for private flood insurance. We all work together, and we have, like Chris said, we have spent thousands of hours, literally, putting these facts and figures together, doing this assessment that we did in 2013 and just published actually in early 2014. And now we're rolling it out to you all so you understand what the levee system can do and is going to do. It's going to continue protecting you. It has provided $7.5 billion worth of protection since it was built. And it's hard to actually figure out how that dollar figure is arrived at. The damage has never happened. But I've got some very smart engineers and cost estimators that know if the river rose like it did in 2012, 2011, and the levees had been there, how many buildings would be damaged, how much emergency response would have had to come in, what that would have cost, and then there's a bunch of smart people that can figure that out. So $7.5 billion that this Wyoming Valley levee system has protected you against since its initial construction back in the 60s. We're happy to continue working together with FEMA, and Gene's going to lay out some things that are going to happen on the FEMA side of the house over the next few years. And we'll continue to make sure these levees are safe and inspected, and work with Chris Bellman and Luzerne Protection Authority and make sure that they're maintained properly so you can continue to be safe. With that, I would like to introduce, I've got two smart people here. The first one that's going to talk is Harvey Johnson. I've got a huge engineering division. I've got 1,200 folks that work for me. My engineering division is over 200 of those folks. And Harvey's in charge of the civil works side of that, so everything that's related to water, essentially. He helps, and he and his team help design and figure out what's going on. So he's going to talk to you about the levee system itself. And then Chris Knowles over there doesn't have a speaking part right now, but during the question and answer section, he's one of my program managers. He manages all the programs and projects in civil works. So he can talk to you if you've got questions related to how we build things or maintain things in the future. So with that, let me turn it over to Harvey, and please, you're much smarter than I am. Try to explain everything that's happened that we've discussed about and assessed in this levee system.
Thank you, Colonel Jordan. Good evening, everyone. Just want to give you a little bit of an overview. The Wyoming Valley Levee Project has been authorized, designed, and constructed to protect against the reoccurrence of the flooding that was witnessed in this area during the Tropical Storm Agnes event of 1972. There's over 16 miles of levees and flood walls. We have 13 stormwater pumping stations and 20 closure structures. As a result of the flooding that we saw in the area from Tropical Storm Lee, There's been over $1.6 million in repairs and rehabilitation work that's been done to this system, all at 100% federal cost. So how does this system provide benefit and performance? As Colonel Jordan indicated earlier, since the original levees were constructed in the 60s and raised again in the late 90s and early 2000s, there's been over $7.6 billion in flood damages prevented to the local communities. Tropical Storm Lee was a major event in this area. I don't have to tell anybody that was here and witnessed it. This system performed very well. There were some things that occurred that are not unexpected that we were able to deal with, but the system performed as it was designed to do so. This system, as designed, can contain the 1% chance event, flood event. And also, the system, as it's designed and constructed, continues to significantly reduce the flood risk to the local community. So we talked a little bit about what's changed right up front, as the Colonel had mentioned, climate, the frequency and the severity of recent flooding events in this area. That directly contributes to an increased flow rate on the river. But when we're looking at these systems and we do our modeling, we look at a lot of things. We also take into account the watershed, the ability for the watershed to be able to contain flood events, land use changes affecting peak rises of the river in a much quicker fashion. And then also there's actual changes in the river itself. Many people have probably witnessed the construction of new bridges. We've had bridges that have been removed. There's changes to the actual cross sections of the hydrology of the river and vegetation as well. Now, which leads to the last point up here, which is the science. The Corps of Engineers has worked very closely with FEMA and NOAA in the development of the model that we use to do this evaluation. We put a lot of effort into adjusting that model to make sure it represented the accurate conditions that we saw out there, including surveyed heights of levees, the surveyed locations of bridges and new bridges. We even took into account all of the additional period of hydrographic flow events that have occurred, and we even calibrated that model to the Tropical Storm Lee event so that the model that we have and we used to produce our science was able to reproduce what we saw during the Tropical Storm Lee event as far as water surface elevations. We use when the system was originally designed back in the 90s, we used hydraulic engineering methods. We do use a different methodology now that takes into account a more risk-based approach to our science and all that comes into play when we were looking at this evaluation. This is a graphic chart that we use to kind of represent that severity and increase of events that I've been talking about. I'm going to use my pointer right here. Oops, sorry about that. If you look right here, the biggest thing you can notice right away is that 4 of the 8 biggest storm events that have occurred in the past 20 years have occurred in the last 20 years. This system was designed in the early 90s, and at the time the 1% frequency event was 254,000 cubic feet per second on the river. This frequency and severity of events that have occurred right here has changed the hydrology on this river, and now, updated for Tropical Storm Lee events, the 2013 hydrology for a 1% frequency event is 293,000. That's a 13% increase in the flow rate on the river for a 1% chance flood event. So this chart graphically kind of shows that increase in storm events that we witnessed. This chart does not show really well, unless you can see it better in the audience. It looks a little washed out right here. Basically, what we tried to capture here with this very faint line, this is the watershed that contributes to the flows that you see at the USGS gauge near North Street, Wilkes-Barre, at the North Street Bridge in Wilkes-Barre. This is a 9,960 square foot area. But as the Colonel had alluded to, we kind of flagged in here the various dam and Corps of Engineers dam and reservoir projects that we have. These projects actually take into account the holdback, we call it. So like during flooding events, we store water at these events to help reduce the flooding you see downstream. When we do our modeling, we take that into account, that we're actually storing water to help the situation. That's a little bit better. Thank you. what are the impacts? Because of all of the things that I mentioned earlier, because of the changes that we've seen, we are not able to certify that the Plymouth Borough and the Wilkes-Barre Hanover Township levies have the required amount of factor of safety that we need. Like Colonel Jordan alluded to earlier, there's not sufficient freeboard in those systems. The systems are not overtopped by these events, but there's not enough freeboard at these events because of that increased flow on the river for us to be able to hydraulically certify them. So this prevents the Corps of Engineers from recommending to FEMA that these systems be recommended for accreditation. And what that could mean, and we're going to get into that a little bit more in the presentation, that there could be changes down the line to the area zone designation of the flood insurance rate maps. So we have a couple graphic slides here that I hope might kind of convey what I've been talking about. This is just a typical sunny day when the river's at its normal height, and it's down below the toe of the levee. Back in 1990, when we were originally designing it, I had mentioned that a typical 1% chance event equated to 254,000 cubic feet per second. And if you look right here, there was a minimum required freeboard, and that was met throughout all locations of the system. So that you had the required freeboard, that factor of safety that we needed in all locations. However, now if you look at it graphically, updated for all of the model changes, all of the river-based changes, the modeling, the increased number of frequency of events, that 1% chance event is now much higher. We do not overtop the levees, but we are up in this area of factor of safety, and we do not have the minimum required freeboard in some locations of the project. Typically, the downstream end of Wilkes-Barre Township and also the Plymouth Township. So, what we produce as the Army Corps of Engineers is we produce levee system evaluation reports that we sign off on, where we look at all factors of levee performance. One of them is the ability to have that factor of safety, but we look at many, many other things as well. Kingston to Exeter, that system, as it's designed and constructed, meets all requirements for levee accreditation. And however, as I had mentioned earlier, the Wilkes-Barre Hanover Township and the Plymouth Borough, they meet all of the levee accreditation requirements except for the minimum freeboard required, and that's that factor of safety that I was talking about. However, all the structural, mechanical, and electrical components of the system are well maintained and are in good operational order, and as designed and constructed, these systems will continue to reduce damages from flooding. And just as a sidebar right here, I made a note here that of the 1,400 levee systems that the Corps of Engineers oversees across the nation, right now, across the nation as it stands, there are only seven systems that are accredited by FEMA. We have 150 which are provisionally accredited by FEMA, which means they're either in the process of seeking accreditation or maybe working to get accreditation. But there are close to 1,200 systems across the nation that are not accredited by FEMA at this point. And I think at this point I'm going to turn it back over to Chris, who's going to introduce Gene.
Thank you, Harvey. Our next speaker tonight is Gene Gruber, who will discuss the status of flood insurance rate maps and levee analysis mapping. Mr. Gruber is the Mitigation Division Director for the United States Department of Homeland Security's Federal Emergency Management Agency, Region III office in Philadelphia, a position that he has held since 2003. Mr. Gruber is responsible for overseeing the three major components of the mitigation division: risk analysis, floodplain management, insurance, and hazard mitigation assistance. Please welcome Mr. Gene Gruber.
Thanks, Chris. It's good to be with everybody tonight. Get right on with my portion of the presentation. As you heard from Harvey, portions of the levee, the two downstream portions, are what we call freeboard deficient. And that means that there's not enough freeboard in those areas to meet that safety factor that we would all want. Key thing I want to point out right now, I know a big thing a lot of people get concerned about, flood insurance and flood insurance premiums. where we are right now, this will not affect the current flood map and will not impact the premiums at this point in time. But we are going to begin the study, working here in the community, and I will talk about that. That will affect the next flood map. So that's the overall view of this. Again, the current map was affected in 2012 in November. It will not be affected, and until a new map goes into place, that will be the insurance zones, that will be the rates that will be in effect. The areas of concern, as you heard from Harvey, downstream, Wilkes-Barre and Hanover Township, and Plymouth Borough. Those are the areas that don't have the freeboard that is required. What we're going to do, and this is something new for FEMA, this is one of the early ones that we're doing a few others in Region 3 as well, but we're going to do what is known as a levee analysis and mapping procedure. We call it LAMP. Again, it's pretty new, and we're going to work with the community over the next few years. As you can see at the bottom here, we're going to start in 2015. Our fiscal year 2015 begins October 1. So that's when we'll start. We'll have funding in place to start the LAMP process, and that will finish sometime during fiscal year 2016. Once the LAMP process is complete, we will then do what I think folks are fairly familiar with. We will come out with a new preliminary map, and that will be in 2017. And the normal process, what will happen is the maps will come out. We will hold what we call community coordination and outreach meetings throughout the area. We will present the maps, give people opportunities to ask questions about the maps, and then we will go into what is known as an appeals period. There will be 90 days to appeal the maps. If communities have information, scientific in nature, that says if nothing's wrong, we're certainly going to take that into consideration. And the maps may be revised if there is valid reasons to do so. And then we're assuming that once that appeals period is complete, the maps will then head into the period of time where the local communities will have time to update their ordinance, and we estimate that the new maps will go effective in 2018. And that's the fiscal year. Again, the LAMP process, we're going to form a local levee partnership team that will work with we're going to work with the communities, all your community officials. We will work with Chris at the Levee Authority. We'll work with the Army Corps of Engineers. We'll work with folks such as the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency, possibly the DEP may have some input. People like NOAA, the United States Geological Survey have been involved in our work in the past, and we'll continue to include them. And again, this effort is going to start in 2015. Potential outcomes, and we don't know exactly where things are going to be on the map and how they will turn out in the final analysis. But potential outcomes, we have a zone called Zone D, and that's an area of undetermined flooding. It's where areas where flooding is possible, but that the risks in detail have not been determined. And again, these are very challenging situations when you try to analyze a levee, and this is a very significant levee system. It runs for miles. And as we run hydraulic models and we keep increasing the water, we won't be doing it actually in the river, but we'll be doing it with the models. When you get to a situation where the water possibly spills over the levee, that's where you get into a situation where you have to see what will happen, where the water will flow, what areas will be impacted, and will there be areas behind the levee that get flow that's not from the river, which is what we call interior drainage. So that's what Zone D would do. This is not considered a special flood hazard area. There would be no federal mandate to purchase flood insurance, and there would be no required floodplain management behind the levee. So that's for the Zone D areas. For Zone A and AE, and those are the areas that are in the special flood hazard area. A is an approximate elevation, and AE, that 1%, that 100-year flow, that elevation is determined and will be printed on the maps. And by the way, copies of the current maps are over there, and you can see them if you're interested on your way out. In that case, this is a high-risk area. There would be mandatory flood insurance. There would be floodplain management requirements for the community to follow. if that's the way it goes. Again, let me stress the flood insurance outcomes. No change until a new map goes into effect. And that's not when we bring it out preliminarily, that's when it goes into effect. The effective date that is printed, you'll see the November 2012 date on those maps over there. One thing we want to mention, lenders can require insurance even, we were hearing this at public meetings, I think we heard it a few weeks ago at Exeter Township, we were there, and folks said, I'm not in a floodplain, but my lender's making me buy flood insurance. Lenders are being very careful today. They understand that even though there's a line on the map, you may be fairly close to that line. Remember, if they're lending you thousands of dollars, they want to protect their investment. They may say you need to buy flood insurance. Good news is, if you're outside of the floodplain, the special flood hazard area, that 1% chance, the insurance rates are lower. But we want to make sure that people know that right up front. We do not know, since this study is going to take several years, we do not know what the individual property owners' zones will be tonight. We can't even begin to project that. So as we go forward, we'll keep communicating with the communities, and we ask you to keep in touch with your flood insurance agent as this process progresses. A few things that communities and individuals can do, some opportunities. Under the National Flood Insurance Program, we have a system known as the Community Rating System. This is where communities can do things to make their community safer and stronger, more resilient to disasters and flooding. And if they do that, they get points towards a percentage reduction in the insurance premium. If somebody's paying $500 and they're getting 10%, they would be paying $450. The maximum under that program is 45%. And there's only a couple out of about 21,000 communities around the country. There's probably, I think, one or two that are getting 45%. Much more typical, 5 or 10%. And there are about 1,200 communities around the country that are in our community rating system. If folks want to reduce their risk, and even if they're behind the levee and protected, there are hazard mitigation assistance grants that can contribute up to 75% of the cost of elevating a home or acquisition of a home. Those grants may be available. They're made through the local government, and you would work with the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency and what is known as the State Hazard Mitigation Officer. There may be other funding sources available as well. There's a group that FEMA has put together, Pennsylvania Emergency Management Agency has helped us put together within the Commonwealth. FEMA, the Army Corps, DEP, USGS, all the agencies I've mentioned before, they are all active in this and they meet monthly. So that's another group that could help. Again, where are we heading here? The future activities, we're going to engage in the land process. We're going to meet with the Commonwealth and local officials, levee owners regarding the level of protection afforded. And ultimately, this is going to be a few years from now, we're going to issue a new flood insurance rate map. And again, that'll be in about 2018 fiscal year. Finally, levee safety tips. You know, I'm sure we saw back when we were at the regional office, we really thought that Lee was not going to be a big thing. It was a tropical storm, then a depression, and it almost disappeared from the radar. And then we started watching that radar, and we started seeing the Doppler radar and the rainfall mount up. And we saw in places there was over 20 inches of rain fell in just over a 24-hour period. So we believe you have a good system. We believe it gives you great protection. The Colonel's a stand-up guy when he says he's going to be behind the levee. But there could be a storm that could be bigger than Lee. So we ask you to be mindful of that. Not trying to scare anybody, but it can happen. We've seen it happen in other areas of the country. So get an emergency supply plan. Make a family plan. Purchase flood insurance. Stay informed. Prepare your home. Prepare your business. And there's a good website, ready.gov. It will give you a lot of information about flooding and levees and making your homes and your communities safer and stronger.
days. Since 1865, since they started recording these things, the river has exceeded the natural flood stage of 22 feet 77 times, or approximately once every 2 years. Therefore, it is no accident that the Wyoming Valley Flood Protection System is one of the largest systems in the nation. The Luzerne County Flood Protection Authority is tasked with the maintenance and operation of the system. As the name implies, our primary mission is to protect the Wyoming Valley from loss of property and lives due to high water events along the river. In support of this effort, and in addition to its routine maintenance duties, the authority is currently involved with the following projects. Levee pipe penetration inspections. Along the 60-mile lake, there are approximately 230 penetrations to the earth embankments that consist of outfall sewers, utility piping, and other type of conduits. These pipes need to be inspected through visual and video means on a 5-year basis. Why is this important? Well, risk analysis indicates that during high water events, water seepage can travel along collapsed or damaged pipe penetrations that could lead to a possible levee breach and left unchecked. So it is very important to evaluate the condition of the penetrations on a periodic basis. Relief well soundings. There are approximately 130 relief wells on the land side of the earthen embankments of the flood protection system. These wells are sounded every year and they're pump tested every 5 years. Again, why is this important? Well, relief wells are typically located near the landside toe of earthen embankments and are installed for the purpose of relieving subsurface hydrostatic pressures which may develop within the pervious foundations of hydraulic structures. The soundings and pump tests are required to determine the well's continued reliability. Roof inspection on the 13 federal pump stations. Again, why is this important? Well, the 13 pump stations contain 39 pumps and associated motor control electronics that control interior flooding on the land side of flood protection during high water events. Each pump costs around $1 million to purchase, so it is very essential to keep these areas in a dry water. Recently, no enforcement letters were issued to approximately 140 property owners in South Wilkes-Barre, Plymouth, and 44 whose lands abut the flood protection system. We continue to work with the property owners and local code enforcement officers on any violation that could impact our flood fighting mission. In a flood emergency, responders need to be able to access the land side of the flood wall and levee reaches to inspect for trouble areas and perform stabilization activities. Obstructions such as fences, decks, landscaping, they certainly impede this effort, and we can't allow that. So we work with the local municipality to try to minimize that as much as possible. New authority maintenance and storage facility. Between high water events, the Market Street Bridge and the Luzerne County Courthouse closure structures are stored at the nearby Pennsylvania National Guard Armory located on Market Street in Kingston. Combined, both closure structures consist of 90 aluminum panels and 28 steel posts. The authority recently received notice from the Pennsylvania National Guard that the panels and posts must be removed within 12 to 18 months from the Armory grounds. This is for a proposed project that the Guard wants to institute. In response, we're moving ahead with plans to construct a new facility directly across Water Street from the Luzerne County EMA that will house the closure structures and their maintenance and administrative requirements. I provide these 5 projects kind of as an illustration that the authority is involved with many maintenance activities besides grass cutting, and that we are committed in protecting the Wyoming Valley and its inhabitants from flood events along the river and by keeping the system in a good operational state of readiness. In closing, I would like to thank again Colonel Jordan and the representatives from both the United States Army Corps of Engineers and from FEMA for the presentation today. Since the creation of the Flood Protection Authority nearly 20 years ago, the authority has developed a very close and professional working relationship with both organizations. And as we move towards the future, we look forward to continuing this relationship with both federal agencies as we face the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. And before I close, I just want to point out to the audience tonight that the PowerPoint slideshow that you saw tonight, it will be available on the Flood Protection Authority website probably by the end of this week. And to access that information, just go to the Luzerne County website, click on the Flood Protection Authority webpage, and that information will be there along with some very good literature that was published by FEMA. So again, I would thank you very much. And at this time, I'd like to open up the meeting to any questions pertaining to the topics that were presented tonight. I respectfully request that any members of the public who have off-topic questions, such as on Salmons Creek or perhaps West Piston, please hold your questions until the end of the question and answer session. At the end, Members of the Corps, FEMA, and myself will be available to meet you one-on-one to specifically talk on those topics. So with that, I'd like to open up the room to take questions. Yes, sir.
Mr. Bell, my name's Frank Bach. I'm on the Plymouth Borough Council. I'm on council for since 1995. Since we're talking about Plymouth, Wilkes-Barre, Hanover not having this extra protection, when the levee system was built, I thought everything was factored at the peaks and we're all the same. How did this happen, or why did it happen? I have difficulty telling people in Plymouth that we could end up being flooded before Kingston or somebody else. And that's the way this is being presented to me. Is there any reason why? And I've heard that Plymouth's levee system is just a little bit lower than the upper part of the valley. Is there any truth to that?
Well, there's a reason for that, and for the response to that, I'll let Charlie Harvey. Sure.
I'll go back to the first part of your question. I think it basically, if I can paraphrase it a little bit, you were saying, why is the upper end of the system not having flooding problems, but the lower end is having it now? The effect that all of these recent storms have had has had an effect on the entire system. There is less freeboard at the upper end of the system as well. When we designed these systems, when we designed it back in 1990, we basically took into account what was the design event at the time. We allowed a certain factor of safety in there. And then the Corps of Engineers or designers who do levees, they use a thing called levee superiority, which is they basically need to have the project to be a little bit higher as it goes further upstream for the sole purpose of preventing the system from being overtopped at anywhere other than the extreme downstream end of the project. Solely to prevent, if water were to overtop, let's say in the middle, it could have flooded in behind the project and flood the areas just as badly. So I guess the quickest answer is there are impacts to the upper end of the project. They have less freeboard, but they still have enough factor of safety that they can be accredited. At the lower end of the project, we still have a little over 2 feet of freeboard, so there's not zero freeboard at the end of these projects, but but it's not enough of a factor of safety for us to be able to accredit it. And I'm sorry, could you repeat that last part again? Or the part I didn't answer yet?
Lower. Why, well, to get more onto it.
Okay.
I could cut to the chase. Are there any plans to try to make the levee system the lower end up?
Yeah, and I can say that right now, the Corps of Engineers has done what it can do under the current authorization. There's no plans to raise the project in any location.
And I agree with you. I stood on that levee, and the water was that far from the top last time.
Yes.
And it's only a matter of time. I don't care what anybody says. That water's coming over the top, especially in fall. There's no doubt. Development up 81, the runoffs. I mean, something should be done with the dredging of the river or something. I mean, we need a little bit of protection. I know there's other areas that are in the same boat. But I just feel that we all pay a levee maintenance fee in this county. We pay what Kingston pays, but we're not being afforded the same type of protection out of us. We could be flooded before they were. I just don't think it's right. Maybe somebody can help me understand that.
I would offer you, when we did our assessment in 2013 and we started early since 2014, both Congressman Barletta and Congressman Carfley were very, very concerned, and they called me and my team in FEMA up to Capitol Hill to talk about just that. Can we raise it? Can we get it designed for the 100-year flood event? The 100-year flood event's going up. Doesn't that mean we can have the authority to give you money to raise it? The short answer, the simplistic answer, overly simplistic answer is no. It was designed for conditions back in essentially 1972, and it was built in 1990, and it was designed with a lot of safety factor. And between all those things that have changed that Harvey highlighted, that safety factor has decreased. So any effort to raise or make the levee system even more protective essentially starts the whole project process all over again. And we'll just look what it took last time, 72 to early 90s to construct. So Congressman asked, can we do that? And we said, yes, but it's a long process, and the bottom line is that it's for the amount of raising you would do, you'd probably have to buy back a lot of properties, you'd have to do a whole bunch of other things, and the cost would be astronomical to prevent against that now, that 1/10% chance that's, and they ask, could we dredge? And that's not part of what the project is authorized. The project is authorized to build walls, not to dredge it, and there's a whole bunch of complications with dredging to include environmental considerations and where do you put the dredge material. But they asked us all those questions, and we provided answers to them, and that's, I'm oversimplifying everything, but the bottom line is we've got the system that we have today, and the best way forward is to prepare for now this increased likelihood, increased storm events that might come down the road. Because in all likelihood, it's not going to be financially viable from a federal perspective just to raise it 6 inches or another couple of feet.
I mean, I know I've been on inspections. The Corps does a fantastic job. I've been over the man on the levee system. The last time we had a problem in the Beach Street area, they were thinking about putting divers down. We had a major problem in that area. Thank God they didn't, because I think those poor men would have went down the river. What affects when things get out of the public? I know there's
weather modification stopped.
2 or 3 councilmen, if we're trying to get people to move into our town, businesses, they see something like this, they say, there's a chance let's go somewhere else. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors to look at.
It's a very complex problem. So, I also like to highlight that statistically it's possible that we have 20 years of dry spell and the 100-year flood event actually goes down. So we're just
It wasn't 100 years where we had a 100-year flood.
I wish it were that simple, but yes, you're exactly.
But thank you, I appreciate it.
Sorry.
I have a question. I want to understand, you said that we have 14 dams, is it?
The Corps of Engineers has built 14 dams
Along the Susquehanna.
The entire Susquehanna River Basin.
Okay. What effect does, not even if we have a storm, but dams north of us, you do open up the gates sometimes when waters above us are high, because you have to release that, some of the pressure. Now, I mean, did you take that into consideration along with the potential of the other flooding? And by the way, I didn't introduce myself. My name's Bill Dixon. I'm from Plymouth, Councilman Plymouth.
Yes. The quick answer is yes, we did. And those projects that we have in this watershed, they have the ability to store an incredible amount of water. Their normal pool elevations are significantly lower than the amount of flooding that they can store. The people who actually help the operators of those dams, the water control people, they actually work for me. And when we have a flooding event in this area, they go on the clock 24/7. We basically have people there monitoring not only what storms are coming into the system, the stream gauge readings that are happening around the system. And the only time we ever release water, we store it as much as we can. We only start releasing when we see flooding conditions downstream are starting to drop. We never add to the flooding that's downstream. There's always the possibility in an extreme, what I would call epic event, for the safety of the dam, they might have to do releases. We've never seen anything like that, but they go out of their way to make sure that they're releasing their waters in a way that's safe, does not exacerbate flooding downstream. And like we said earlier, we take into account the storage capability that these projects have to reduce flooding in the area when we're doing our modeling as well. So while you may see releases, I know frequently during high water events, people will call and say, hey, there's something coming out of the dam. At that point, if that's occurring, it's because we've looked at the inflow that's coming into the system, we've looked at the stream gauge readings downstream, and we've made the assessment that doing these releases is not going to increase the flood stage of this location.
Tony George, I'm on the Wilkes-Barre City Council. I'm on the same page as the Plymouth Councilman. If I recall, the dike was built at the same time. Wilkes-Barre, one side, Kingston, the other side, Plymouth, Hanover. Now, I'm not an engineer, but I know water seeks its own level. So if it's not 39 feet on the Kingston side, which we're directly across, it should be 39 feet on the Wilkes-Barre side. So why wasn't the Wilkes-Barre side built up as high as the Kingston side? Because you're saying Kingston's fine, there's no problem. They're not in the flood zone, but Wilkes-Barre is.
And the immediate answer to the question is that the levee systems on both sides of the stream are built at the same elevation. I know there were people during the flooding event that were witnessing, based on, I guess, visual readings, higher elevations, like maybe sometimes it looked like it was within 6 inches. I do know there was a bend in the river there. There's been a lot of discussion about that in our office, about maybe what dynamic might have been going on at the time.
But that was there when you built the dikes.
But
It's not new.
yeah, the levees are at the same elevation. We don't have a levee on one side that's higher that would push more water onto the opposing bank if that's the immediate.
No, my question is, why don't we have that full safe way that the Kingston side had? If we're the same line. And water seeks its own level. So it's 39 feet straight across.
Yeah, and the quickest answer, going back to my original discussion, was to simplify things a little bit. When we originally designed the system, we had a certain factor of safety at the extreme downstream end.
But we're not downstream. We're directly across from Kingston.
Okay. Oh, definitely caution.
Yeah.
And you're
The Market Street Bridge goes from Wilkes-Barre to Kingston.
and you're in the Wilkes-Barre Township.
And we're in the Wilkes-Barre.
Okay. If you're in the upstream section of the Wilkes-Barre Township, it's very likely that you have enough freeboard in your system.
We're not Wilkes-Barre Township. We're Wilkes-Barre City.
Okay.
And Kingston and Evansville goes right even with Wilkes-Barre. And they're not in the floodplain.
Are you talking about this location right here, sir?
Right there. Is that what they're-
You see the... I can't tell where we're at. All I know is Kingston and Wilkes-Barre directly across from each other.
Okay.
So if one side's safe, both sides should be safe.
I'm sorry, it took me a little bit to understand your question, but I do understand it now. If I'm going to point to this particular location right here. When we did the evaluations for the Wilkes-Barre Hanover Township levee system and the Plymouth Township system, we had to look at various locations along the entire system. There are cross sections that we were evaluated at the extreme upstream section, probably in the location where you're talking about, where the risk-based analysis was appropriate and there is enough freeboard. However, when we evaluate the system, we have to look at it in its entirety. The areas that we do not have enough freeboard are at the extreme downstream end of these systems, down here towards the tail end of the project.
Where does Evansville stand? Are they protected or not? Because you're saying Plymouth Township. How about Evansville? Because we're no further south than Evansville.
I might need some help on the location of the cities.
Sir, I think what I would offer is we have labeled these 3 levee systems as sufficient or insufficient freeboard. However, as Gene pointed out, to determine the risk of flooding behind it, we actually don't just look at the whole system, we look at pieces of the system to figure out where and model it, where the risk might be higher. So in the instance of where the 2 systems are across the river from each other, I think what Harvey just said is they're the same height, they provide the same amount of protection. And the insufficient amount of freeboard is further downstream from that section on the Wilkes-Barre side. And that modeling, the land process will bear that out and show that the upstream side is likely has minimum flood risk, whereas somewhere in the middle or lower down is the area where it's potentially going to spill over.
None of this was taken into consideration when you were building the dike with the freeboarding?
Yes, it was.
Because I think the Luzerne County has a planning commission, and they're supposed to, whoever builds up now has to put a retention basin in. And if they're doing that, there shouldn't be any freeboarding because it should be held in a retention base until the water goes down. So I'm confused why, there is freeboarding. If the planning commission did the job, everybody would have a retention basin.
And what I would offer, sir, is that it's a very complex system, and so we're designing this back in the 80s.
No, I think it was in the 90s.
We built it in the 90s, but the design studies were done in the 80s. And the design was developed in the 80s, and then it goes through a long process in Congress. We had authorized the funding.
So you did something, you had an Army tank made in the 60s, when the 90s came, since it was planned, you just went on with the tank? Is that how it works? You don't update it?
So we try to predict the future. And the way we predict the future is to give a significant amount of safety factor in there. And since then, two things have happened. One is the climate has changed, and we've had higher flooding events, bigger, more frequent events, which have driven the likelihood, the probability of a 1% flood up higher. And some of the things that Harvey alluded to have changed. The river profiles have changed because sediments have come down. We try to predict the sediments, but it's 16 miles of levee system, and you're looking 20, 30 years into the future, and that's what that factor of safety is. And, part of the factor of safety wasn't quite enough to meet the minimum freeboard requirement in 2014.
My name is Dwayne Hamilton. I'm a resident of Wilkes-Barre. I think part of the things that we'd like to know is what section is Section D, what section is Section A, and what is AE. Second, when you're doing a 20 or 30 year study with the intention of building, what you're telling us right now is 10 to 20 years from now, we're going to pay more money to have that extra water board. It isn't something that we have to, because you're saying you're not going to build the backup anymore. So what are you going to do? Change the flow of the river or move people?
But before we talk about the flood zones, like I said a few months ago, for all we know, the next 20 years will be dry, and that 1% event is going to go down, and that minimum required freeboard will be there. That could be one outcome. We could be having more and more worse floods, in which case, there's a potential chance that it's worth the cost to build higher and higher, because the damage is, predicted damage is going to happen more and more often.
No, but I just heard you say that we weren't going to build the dam up really high. Am I incorrect?
I am saying that at the present time, without doing any hard studies, which cost some money, the current assessment from the folks that have been doing this for 40 years is that in all likelihood, the cost would be much more than any benefit. And because of the limited amount of federal dollars, they tend to go to projects that where you get the benefit, more benefit than the cost.
Well, I mean, basically, my point is, I have a house to protect.
Yes, sir.
I have insurance to pay for. Okay? If we're not going to build the dike up any higher, what does it take to get that segment its accreditation?
Essentially, if you're going to do a mechanical system, a mechanical solution, a physical solution, it needs to get built higher. And it's not just building higher, because the higher you build it, the wider you've got to go. We're much more eloquent, right?
Just right up front there, at this particular time, there is no authorization or appropriations to do any additional modifications to this project. That speaks to the process the Colonel was talking about, the whole process that took many years before to go through studies and all, talking about raising it. There's nothing to do that right now. However, like the Colonel had alluded to, we could go through a period of time going forward where there would be less frequent storms. And this is an evolving science. It just continues. Every time you get more data, like every annual years of data that come in, they contribute to the overall mapping and hydrology of the river. They could change that. That's not something that anybody should ever count on, though. The trend has been here lately that these storms seem to be continuing on a regular basis. We don't know what the next years are going to show, so the risk is there. Speaking about, what was the last part of the question? You talked about what can you do to protect your home? Oh no, I remember now. You had asked earlier, said, what about the zone designations? And I'll let Gene speak to that, because that's a process that they get involved in.
As I mentioned, we have this land process, the levy analysis and mapping procedure that we're going to go through. And tonight, I can't tell you what the zones are going to be. And that's what we will be determining as we work closely with the communities, the Corps, the levy authority here. So we will know that. Right now, if you're behind the levy system, any one of them, they're all showing as protecting, and I believe the designation is what we call Zone X. That's out of the mandatory requirement, right? Mr. Janowitz, where are you, sir? Right there. X? Yeah. So it's all what we call non-special flood hazard area. There is no mandatory purchase requirement. And again, sir, I'm the FEMA guy. Flood insurance is something we do every day. We talk about. I would suggest if you feel that you're concerned about the safety, whether the storm could be bigger, you can get flood insurance now. Even if you're in that X zone, that flood insurance will be cheaper because again, premiums are based upon risk. If the risk is shown as being lower, the premium will be lower. So I'm not sure what the exact price would be. If you have questions, let me tell you this. Gentleman over here from the National Flood Insurance Program with his hand up, that's Walt McGuckin. See Walt, talk to him afterwards. He can help you understand the basics and feed you to a website that we have and where you'll be able to talk to agents and so on. So I
already have the insurance.
go.
My question more so is that because of the accreditation, how soon am I to look forward to my premiums going up?
Well, there's been a lot that's going on and changes in the law that may make your premiums go up. There was something called the Bigger Waters Act in 2012 that Congress passed and President Obama signed off on. There is the Homeowners Flood Insurance Affordability Act, which was just passed earlier this year. And they're going back and forth as to, a lot of people were saying flood insurance rates are going way up. Okay, the flood insurance rates that a lot of people pay currently throughout the country, they are subsidized. Okay, they are not the full risk rates. What the Bigger Waters Act did was remove those subsidies over a period of time. They're going to go away a certain percentage here. That has concerned people about the flood insurance rates going way up. The Affordability Act has said, okay, let's back off on that. Let's put that on hold for a while. We're doing what is known as an affordability study, okay? A lot of people have said, I just can't afford this. I can't afford to pay $5,000 or $10,000. Yes, the rates can be that high in certain areas, especially in the really high-risk areas in the river and along the coast. So people said we can't afford that. Right now, things are on hold. We're doing an affordability study, just like we're going to be studying the levy here, the whole system. There's another study going on. So, to answer your question, insurance rates could be going up even without this. All right, but it's going to be for these rates as a result of a change in the maps here in this area. That will be, we estimate, 2018 fiscal year. Somebody said to me at a meeting last night, though, 4 years goes by really quick. So, that's why, I would tell you, you have input, you have concerns, bring it to the community officials, and we're going to be here to listen to everybody, and we want to do a good study. We want to determine what the right zones are here in the Wyoming Valley.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you for coming to my question is, I don't know if you've done a full analysis of the levy. I believe you said 4 years it took to do an analysis, full analysis of the levy raising.
The levy raising, now that's what has already been done. I'm saying what we're going to be doing, FEMA, working with the Corps over the next 4 years.
Right, I understand.
We're going to be looking at the levy as it exists now, as it's been fully constructed, and we're going to be looking at this data that we have, the new data of the higher flows. Again, the higher flows is why we pointed it out, especially the one that really bumps the curve up significantly is the Lee event. That was the one that, you know, I've talked to people all over, and some people said this close, some people said it was like this in certain spots. So very close to getting right to the top of the
My
lake.
question is, under the core side of the design memorandum, the county commission, the levee system was built. Under that stipulation, I was wondering if you did a full analysis in your study on the mitigation aspect. And have you done a review of this? And has that been any steps, and could you tell us any progress that has been made since the levee has been raised? Which is part of the GDM.
You're talking about the mitigation portion of the study.
Well, the negative impacts that were part of the study, the flood study that was done to build the levee. Under that GDM, within that scope, there was a benefit cost analysis done across the board. What transpired out of that, as I said, there was areas that did not meet that VCO.
Right.
Okay? There was mitigation aspects that were implemented in that agreement that were going to be mitigated as a result of the negative impacts up and down the river, West Pittston and south of the levee rating. Did you do any analysis, or did you give any word on the progress of the mitigation aspect of that part of the levee raising?
I'm aware of the mitigation portion of the GDM that you speak of, where it named various communities and certain dollar amounts that would be associated with mitigation efforts as a result of this project being constructed the way it is.
My point is, and I understand you said you're going to do an impact study and from the levee rating itself, but that'll be 4 years out. That was the question, because at that time, the peak discharges were probably 50,000 cubic feet per second less than what initially we got. And the impacts that happened north of the levee, that's why West Pittston got hit hard. Under that GDM, like I said, it was shown that the building of the levee would increase, and Agnes observed that it would increase the height of the water upstream and downstream. There was a mitigation aspect of that GDM,
Correct.
which would rectify or try to satisfy that parts of the increase on them communities,
And
up and down the related levee system. And that's what's not being, for some reason, that's not coming out. West Pittston's asking, why did we get flooded so hard? South of the levee system's asking, why did we get hit so hard? And I understand they are still part of the floodplains. But under that agreement, there was supposed to be something done as to mitigate that as a result of levee raising. And I don't believe anything has been done.
yeah, I'm probably not going to be the best person.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think I can provide a few comments with regard to that. I mean, as part of the levee raising project, there was a mitigation aspect, not only in Luzerne County, but in the 4 downstream counties. And that's an active program. We are, myself and my counterparts in the lower 40 counties, we're in the process of acquiring properties and getting them demolished and converting them into green space.
I understand. He's had the flood committee at that time. He's included the community, the counties that were to the south. Northumberland County, Susquehanna County.
No, that's cool, but
They were all part of
Northumberland County, Montour County,
Montour County, right? Because I remember Mayor Cannon.
and Northumberland County.
What I'm saying is, there was a mitigating aspect for them counties. They was agreed to. They were going to get a flood wall down there. That was satisfied with those counties. When I'm saying within Luzerne County, what has been done to satisfy the mitigation aspect of the levee raising within Luzerne County?
Well, something that we're involved with right now, we are acquiring a property in Macanagua. I think that's going to be
I
acquired and
understand,
demolished.
that's hazard mitigation, but that's as a result of leak, it's a result of
What, when you say mitigation, are you talking about projects?
I'm talking
Small flood control projects?
Exactly. I'm talking about, there was a $20 million pool, seed money, under the GDM for mitigating factors of the increased impact of the levee raising on the communities upstream and downstream. I should have brought it with you. I could have brought charts. I could have done the whole thing. But the whole problem I'm trying to say is it showed an impact of an increase of 2 feet of water north and up to 3 to 4 feet south. All I'm saying is
Flooding people on purpose.
nothing has been done in Luzerne County area to mitigate that. And I attended a lot of the mitigation meetings during that time. You know, we're talking 10 years, 10, 15 years ago. Well, all I'm trying to say is there wasn't a agreement made for the counties that were being impacted under that GDM. Well, I'm saying within Luzerne County, within this study and this analysis, which is, you know, within this, just Luzerne County itself.
I mean, you're absolutely correct. It's part of the mitigation effort. It's just not acquiring and acquiring properties and then demolish and breaking their utilities. There's also, you know, small flood control project aspects of it.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And that's an active program. Like over the last few years, I mean, it's not like the $30 million.
What I'm saying was an analysis done of
People
that.
got flooded last time.
Under the levee raising project. This is analysis of the levee raising levee system. The impacts of it, negative and positive.
All that water comes
I think I might have a partial answer to this, talking to Chris over there. So part of this entire project was roughly 20, I think you said $18 million for mitigation, for projects. And the way it works is Luzerne County Public Authority does the projects, then essentially bills us back. Chris thinks roughly about 8 million of that 18 has been done. So there's about 10 million more that could be done. I don't know all the things that have been done. I've heard a couple of them here. I think your question though is, have we turned around and looked at those projects that were done and did they achieve the intended purpose?
Right. That was my point, because I was looking, I know you're going to post this on your website, but all I'm saying, is there an actual levee raising analysis that you've done that's going to be written, not just this, not that, you know,
The actual levy assessment?
is there going to be some type of report filled out that will show the mitigating, in other words, is that going to be shown under that agreement? Will it show what transpired as a result of the levee raising? That's like I'm saying. I think that we've been, as to pumping stations, there have been many communities upstream, Exeter, and all that, that wanted additional pumps. It was all part of the levee raising. In other words, that would be done in the future, obviously, to mitigate the aspect. And I understand it would take over years to implement. But it doesn't seem like it transpired, because that's what's missing in the puzzle. Under that mitigation aspect, that was only seed money to take care of the negative impacts of water pushing up into the communities in the north and communities to the south. And that's all I'm saying. That's what's missing. I understand you're saying that there's no funding to raise the levees. Raising the levees would only increase waters to the north and south. Okay? The bottom line is, they should be trolled that they have a levee system, because I was part of it that didn't have it. But all I'm trying to say is, I lived in the part that was to be mitigated. And we suffered, we were hit. We wouldn't have got that much flooding, and that's all I'm trying to say. We wouldn't have got that much flooding if it wasn't for the levee. And I understand, but it was part of that general design, that it was to be mitigated. And there's nothing being said about it.
Do you have a list of things that have been done over the years with the...
Yes, we do have a list of things that have been done over the years, and I understand, like the past few years, there has been a lot of litigation activity. Like I came on board as director.
I understand. You're doing a great job.
But just to let you know, it has been a long time since there's been litigation work, and I have met with the other 4 counties just within the past two months to restart the mitigation program again. And what I propose to do, I want to reopen the application process, probably third quarter of this year, and get fresh applications in. We'll review them, and I want a fresh start. I want a fresh kick.
Because my only point was, all I'm trying to say is, as they're saying there's no additional funding, we have an agreement with the court through that general design memorandum, and it's noted. It's a signed agreement that mitigation factor is to take effect. What I'm trying to say is, if that didn't happen, that might be our means as a funding source. Because if this doesn't transpire, maybe that's our way in. If they're saying, money's not, but we're not asking for a new project. We're asking for a project to be fulfilled.
And that's something that we're going to be doing. I'm going to be working with my core counterpart, Rolando Sanadad, sitting up here in the back.
Any information I have, everything.
And we're going to restart that process.
I have
We're going to get the
the
applications, and we're going to restart the mitigation program. So we're going to get that going again.
Good. I'm going to call you tomorrow and ask you what you think of the weather modification.
I'm Fran Barba, and I'm concerned about Hanover Township. And I think I understand what that man is talking about. I never got flooded before, and all of a sudden, with Lee, I got flooded in my house. And if I knew I was going to get flooded, I wouldn't have bought the house there, right? And now, you're more or less, everybody in my family says it's because they raised the levee system in Wilkes-Barre. Now, everybody, the river is wider, and more places are getting flooded as it goes down. The river goes down towards Nanticoke, West Nanticoke, Susquehanna, all those places got more flooding because of that. But however, I didn't even understand, like there's a creek running in Nanticoke, in Hanover Township. And it's Nanticoke Creek or whatever, and it has a lot of that mine water in it and all. When I was watching the river coming over this way, the highway has a big flood coming from this creek. And the flood actually from the creek came as close as mixed in with the water from from the river. And there's a bank and there's a wood, like on the side. The bank is fairly high. And before, whenever there was a flood, it never came over that area. But do you think they can extend that bank up higher or do something physical to these places? Because why would you want them, why would people want to be getting flooded year after year? I mean, it was hard. I don't know what you can do about it, but I would just like, you to think about this thing. I don't know if Hanover ever brought it up or not.
I believe that area that you're describing is the downstream of the Flipper, Texas system. Because the Flipper, Texas system ends in Hanover Township, but it ends at Solomon Creek. I believe the area you're describing is downstream of that area.
Yeah, down off the Sansui Highway there. Down that whole section, and then there's a section in Nanticoke, West Nanticoke that gets flooded.
That's far downstream from
That is far
Texas.
downstream. And since I was never flooded before, my brother-in-law, who is part engineering type of guy, he says to me it's because they made the levees higher in Wilkes-Barre and got flooded.
I mean, that is true. When you have a Flipper, Texas system, with the levees that we have, it's going to impact upstream and downstream as well. Whether that's specific to your case, I don't know. I'd be more than happy to talk about that. You have to do.
Outside.
Any community wants analysis of what has actually happened. I'm not saying it's an easy process. I'm not saying it's cheap. There's different programs in the Corps of Engineers, some federal fundings, some have all federal funding. Take a look at that and then craft a design system and construct it. But it is a very long, tedious, and sometimes very expensive process that we could look at in your community. There's ways to ask the Corps of Engineers to apply that money towards that end.
I have a question up here.
My name is Mike Stever. I'm from, we're doomed, not in Susquehanna, so we are doomed. My question is to the Corps of Engineers. Since 1972 is when all this data has been taken, because that's when the first major flood that really affected the valley. Has the Corps taken readings every year how much the river we're losing, how much is the bottom coming up from sediment?
Yeah, the quick answer to that is no. We periodically take river cross-sections when we're doing modeling. So for this project, we probably did cross-sections back in the early 90s, probably at the earliest. Like the Colonel had alluded to earlier, though, the frequency of these storms, there's lots of sediment that gets transported, sometimes it actually to the better, sometimes to the worse. But we don't continuously monitor how much sediment is in the streams and how it's changing that cross-section of the river.
But you do agree that we are losing the river, the bottom's coming up. You got to agree to that.
The only thing I would agree to is that it's changing a lot. I can't say
Absolutely.
that in one condition it might be better in some locations when the flood rivers come through. In other cases it may be a worsening condition, but it's unknown, but it's changing.
Yeah, because I know in Chick-City down along the river, back in the 50s, when I was a kid on the ball field, the river was maybe 15, 20 feet below the level of the ball field.
Right.
You get down there now, sir, and you know where the river is? It's right, it's only 1 or 2 feet below that ball field now. So the river's definitely coming up. The other thing to the dikes and that, you built the dikes back in the 90s, they were designed in the 80s. This is 2014 now. You're going to come out with the new maps now in 2018. That's going to change flood insurance for everybody, so we're going to pay more money, there's no doubt about it. But at what point in time do you have to say, hey, my dike level are outdated for the valley. We have to start thinking about changing the height of our dikes, the different types of dikes we have because of the amount of water we're getting.
Okay. When the project was originally authorized and we did our design, it was to be able to safely pass a reoccurrence of what Tropical Storm Agnes flow was at that time, which I think was calculated after 1972 with whatever the USGS calculated the flow rate was. When we do our accreditation reports, we basically take into account all of the new data that's occurred, and we basically say, what does that mean to the existing levee system as it's constructed? The system has performed, very well. I know I'm repeating myself from the slides. We had an event, Tropical Storm Lee, that was a big event for this area. It was able to contain that flood. Unfortunately, when we get into this type of analysis now, we look at how these things compare to how much factor of safety you have for these various systems. And even though these systems do not get overtopped, there's simply a reduced amount of freeboard because there's a larger volume of water that goes down the river for a 1% chance event now. And while I consider the levee projects to be safe, they can contain an event like that, they just don't have that factor of safety that allows us to be able to recommend them for accreditation.
Your question was, when are we going to assess it again? And I think the answer is we can assess it at any point in time. It could be this year, it could be next year, but that assessment essentially is the beginning of a new project. So it starts off with a year-long federally funded piece, and then it goes into a partnership with a cost-share partner for a full study. It takes up to 3 years. And so we can continue to do this, but the question is, where's the funding coming from? And in most instances, communities, the state doesn't have the funding to do an assessment every 10 years or every 20 years. And it took a Hurricane Agnes to get the assessment of the existing levee system reassessed. I don't know if it takes a Tropical Storm Lee to do that again. I don't think so because it held. Maybe the flood insurance potential changes that are going to happen will cause that reassessment. I'll repeat something I said about 10, 15 minutes ago, though, is the folks that have been doing this for a long, long time think that if you did the assessment right now, in all likelihood, the cost of raising the levee would be so astronomical compared to the benefit, as near and dear as your homes and your personal belongings are to you, and I completely understand that, and they're priceless from that perspective. The cost of replacing the infrastructure is much, much less than the cost of raising the levee.
Let me ask one more question. This is hypothetical. Let's go back to the 72 flood. When the dikes broke, the water spread out in the valley. Did you ever take all that water and put it back in the river and see how high the river would have been? In other words, if I took the water and put it back in the river, within the width of the river, how high would the dikes have to be at that time to protect the valley?
And I think, correct if I'm wrong, but that's essentially what the 1972 authorization did. It said, don't let another Agnes happen again. So figure out if all that water had stayed in the river, how high do the levees need to be? And it was raised 3 feet, 6 feet?
Depending on the location, it changed. It was different amounts of freeboard. I think at the upstream end of the project, probably over 5 feet of freeboard. At the lower end of the project, close to 3.
So yes, we took into account all that water and designed the levee system to contain.
But you raise the dikes from the original 72 up to 5 feet. Is that correct?
Right, to be able to contain a reoccurrence of the tropical storm Agnes flow with that freeboard I just mentioned.
Okay, let's go back to 72 flood then. What was the freeboard, after you built the dikes up, what was your freeboard then?
Like I had mentioned, it varies depending on the project. At the upstream project, you have more, but you never had less than, I think, 2.7.
Now this last flood, there was places that almost come over the dike.
Exactly.
So if there's no more call to build the dikes any higher, it's going to affect me downriver more. It's going to affect up the river. It's also going to affect the valley because eventually it's going to go over the dike. So, but the bottom line is here is the government would sooner, what they're going to do to get me out down there and people in Wilkes-Barre eventually, it's going to happen, is raise the flood insurance and drive you out. That's the bottom line. Because we just asked you, this man gentleman over here asked you about money for dikes raising, and that's not even in the ballpark. I'm not even talking about that. Now, 2018, you're going to come out with a new flood map. And I know darn well insurance rates are going to go up for unprotected areas. So eventually, sir, you're going to, not you, but the Corps, is going to, that's how they're going to force the people away from these areas that's flooded all the time. They're going to do it with the flood insurance. But my flood insurance went up last year. And it's not going to go down. It's just going to keep getting higher and higher until I say, hey, I can't afford it no more, I have to get out.
So I understand your points. I don't think the Corps wants to force anybody. Pardon?
They said nobody's going to buy
If the flood insurance goes up like that, that's going to continue to raise. You won't even be able to sell your property. You're just going to move away and leave the building. And it's going to be up to the government, the county, the city to take care of it. Because what are we going to do? Most of the valley is elderly. And with the prices going up, Social Security doesn't go up that much. How are we going to pay these fees?
And what I'd offer
They don't care.
is that these are valid concerns. I've got parents that they have to live on top of a mountain down in the flood zone, but they face similar concerns as they're facing now. Okay. Please go talk to your local government, your state government, your federal government, because they're the ones that can potentially write the laws and appropriate the funds to do something different. In the Corps of Engineers, we designed something, we designed it to accomplish a purpose. It's still accomplishing that purpose. Yes, you change Mother Nature, you change the way that the profile of the land looks. It makes changes upstream and downstream. We have some mitigation plans in place. Is it perfect? Nothing's perfect, but certainly the levees are holding back water that wouldn't have been held back in 1950. So,
I understand that, but, you know, what about the islands that are out there? Can't they take some of those out there that would help I mean, there's quite a bit of them.
Yeah, I had Harvey look at that.
One of the things after we met with the senators on Capitol Hill, we were looking at a number of things when we came back. And we actually did a very, very quick analysis because of, I'm going to say the name of the island, Richards Island? Okay, I would say it different. We took a look at Richards Island and we thought to ourselves, okay, this is obviously the biggest thing in the river. We looked at, could you take the trees down? Could you get rid of the island in its entirety? And thing that would be very difficult to do from an environmental aspect. Bottom line is, our analysis showed us by looking at various versions of removing that island, whether it was vegetation or the island itself, it didn't help the downstream end of the project at all. It helped the upstream end of the project. Hydraulically, it helps the upstream. They got more freeboard at the upstream end of the project where they don't need more freeboard. They were already certified.
We do have islands upstream too.
These models and the complexity of how they analyze the stuff sometimes has an effect that it wouldn't make common sense from when you see it. But that obstruction provided less backwater effect to the upstream end of the project. Did not really impact the amount of freeboard down the lower end of the project. Because we were looking at that, we thought, even if something like that could happen, would it really help out?
You mean upstream like Wilkes-Barre?
Yeah.
I mean, then the only other community is Kingston and Holyport. They're the only ones you want to protect.
No.
You don't care about the east side of the river, it's just the
No.
west side. That's what it sounds like you're saying. Hanover doesn't count, Wilkes-Barre doesn't count, West Pittston doesn't count, they're too far north.
I'm an engineer. We strictly look at the science of the thing. And what I was basically saying was, we looked at that island and we said, hey, if this wasn't here, what effect would it have?
Oh, they just say Wilkes-Barre could be flooded.
Well,
Or Hanover. That's not worth anything.
That's the science of what would happen, but they already have the freeboard there. It wasn't helping.
No, we don't have the freeboard. You just said it. We don't have it.
I mean, when the flood study was done, I mean, it's been quite a long time. We've had a massive amount of development within the watershed.
That was one of the points.
I mean, we have some major disasters. One employment, I mean, the whole side of the pond come down through right. Our watersheds, Toby Creek, they're all washing out. I mean, we have a major problem with our stormwater management, and it's all headed south. And I don't believe that. Obviously, it's been years since the flood study has been done for peak flow discharges out of each tributary. I mean, it just seems like that's what's really causing a major impact on our levee system. And it's something that has to be looked at. And I don't know if it was ever done. We don't have any monitoring on our streams that show a discharge. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, this whole plateau has changed since the 80s. I mean, massive amount of development.
Well, we're supposed to have a Luzerne County Youth Planning Commission, we're supposed to take care of that.
Well, can I just say something? What I learned, I went to a workshop, and I learned that Pennsylvania has 86,000 miles worth of streams and lakes. We're the second flood-prone state in the United States. Alaska is first. Some of these problems that we're facing are man-made too. And that's a fact.
Thank you.
And I do appreciate this forum here tonight, because the bottom line, I think, is what they're trying to say is, really, we can't depend totally on the government. They're going to do what they can do. They're authorized to do what we can do, but we as citizens, have to do something ourselves to protect our properties. And I mean, you don't like it. I mean, I don't like it.
Citizens like it.
Life is good. You know what I'm saying? But once you have that understanding of that, I think that's where they're really coming from here.
I have a gentleman here with a question.
Good, thank you. Larry Delgrado, Dexter Borough Council, but I'm also a realtor and appraiser. And I don't want to leave here tonight not understanding what your study's all about. And your study properties in Wyoming Valley, upstream or downstream, whatever, but rather just to make a study and show what the accreditation of the free board is, and then affect flood maps, redesign flood maps, rezone properties, possibly bring more properties into special flood hazard areas of either the AAE and even the X500, and therefore bring more people into paying flood insurance, and therefore devaluing those properties. As an appraiser, flood-prone properties devalue extremely and are very hard to sell. And these people who invested years in these properties just keep losing value. So my understanding is that your study is to remap the valley.
We're going to be looking at the current levee that has been constructed by the Corps and has been raised. And the big thing to remember, and again, this chart, I think if you remember one thing out of tonight, it's this chart. This graph, excuse me, this graph gives you, I think it speaks volumes here. When the flood study that went and is effective, this number right here, that was from 1990, that's what we were still using with the 2012 maps. The 1%, and that's the standard that all the FEMA maps, whether you're in the special flood hazard area or out, that is the standard that's used nationally. That number, 254,000 CFS, that's what the current maps that are over there on that table for Luzerne County are used as the flood. Now, with what has happened with here, and especially this is, folks, this is the 500-pound gorilla here. This event that's happened so close to these other events and so close to Agnes. Look at the difference. I mean, you know, it's been,
Look at since 1968.
28 and 11, 39 years. That's much shorter than a 100-year event. In 100 years, within that 39 years, we've had two very significant events. And what number we're going to be using when we do this LAMP study is this number, 293,000. So the reality is, and I know there's a lot of other factors that are going into, people are talking about sedimentation, development, all those things are factors that add, but this is the big thing. We're going from 254,000 cubic feet per second of water coming down the Susquehanna to 293,000. A significant increase. That's what, 13%, Harvey said. That's the big thing that's changed, and that's the science of it. Now again, could this number go up more, or could it come down if we have more periods of this, 26 years of flow activity or 21 years? We're going to keep looking at this. This is something we look at all the time. Whether it's dry or wet, we look at these values, and things may change. They will change in the future. It's not going to stay static.
But right now, based on what you know, your goal is not to suggest how to protect the valley, but rather remap it and bring more people possibly into the flood zones.
Well,
Is that correct?
Yeah, make more money.
I want that question answered, yes or no.
that's not my goal. That's the reality of what we see here.
Okay.
We've got more water. And again, like I said, I'm not here to tell anybody, not to live here or it's dangerous. That's not, let's be honest. There's some risk here, and you need to prepare for that risk. But the reality is that the risk has increased, and that's what we're here. And this is why I also talked about this with my presentation. These are the type of things that people want to be thinking about. The community rating system to keep the insurance rates as low as they possibly can. The hazard mitigation assistance, maybe homes even behind the levee, maybe they should be elevated. That will maintain property values. When we're done the study, you're going to see that the maps will be redone. There'll be many areas, I believe. All right, remember, you held the system did this, okay? You have to look at this, which is going to be factored into our study. We're going to be looking at 293. The system held just a couple of years ago, held 310, okay? So that indicates that for the most part, things may be very good here with this event. Who knows? Is there going to be another one of these? didn't say that. So our goal is not to,
Not the whole purpose. What's your purpose?
the purpose is to look at the levee system as it's built, put the new data into the system, and see what we get out when we look at this. We do not, the maps that we have today showing the levee is totally protecting, they show the 254,000 CFF. So that's the goal, is to evaluate how the risk has changed, how the zones may change. And you're right, there may be some zones, there will likely be some increase, but we can't say how much that will be today. That's why we want to work with you closely, so that the worst thing, I can do to my wife is surprise her. We don't want to surprise you. We want to let you know what's coming. That's why we're here tonight. We're not hiding. We want to come out in front of everybody and say, we've got some news, we're here to share it, and we want to work
But
with
your
you.
purpose is not to offer corrections or suggest ways to protect the valley. It's just to remap, basically.
That is the purpose, that's the purpose of the FEMA
I'm asking,
study.
what's the purpose of this study?
The study is to look at what the flood zones should be with the new flow
But
pattern.
not to offer corrections.
That-
Not to make
That's part of
suggestions
what
on
Sir,
dying crazy.
that's not a FEMA.
That's what I'm asking.
So the Corps of Engineers can do that.
Exeter Borough isn't protected by Guy Peters, West Piston, but, and we met with Senator Casey already at our borough meeting, so.
And the Corps of Engineers.
I just want to know your purpose of this study, what the money's being spent for.
And again, the two things that we have to offer you here is, the Corps has done the structural solution.
Yeah,
The FEMA things that we see, again, are more of the non-structural solutions. The acquisitions, the elevations, those type of things. That's what we worked. After Irene and Lee, there were people who weren't protected in many places. Gentlemen from Susquehanna, many people said, that's it, I've had enough, what can you do for me? And their homes were acquired and will be demolished, and the area will be returned to open space. Is that the preferred solution for everybody? No, it's not. People who've lived in places for decades don't want to just say, it's time to move tomorrow. But some people got to that point where they said, this is the best thing for us to do. And we supported it, and we've got about 600 families, we hope, throughout the Commonwealth, mainly here in the Northeast, that are going to be out of harm's way. And a lot of people told us, that's what I need to do because I can't sleep anymore.
I just want to leave here tonight thinking you're going to make suggestions to the higher ups how to raise the dikes or dredge the river, but that's not your purpose. Your purpose is to remap the valley.
But I think the end of the study will tell us the risk that we see today, and that will lead to those solutions that you're looking for. I think that's the next step in the process, and I believe we'll all be here to talk about that. That's not something that's going to go away. And again, some of these things like the silver jackets that the Army Corps participates in, your State Hazard Mitigation Officer, Tom Hughes, who I worked with for years, those are the people that should be brought in, and we can start to work on it. He works for FEMA, his name is Tom Hughes. Yep, he's the State Hazard Mitigation Officer, and those are the type of things, for example, communities are coming in with applications. I know West Pittston's got some coming in this Friday, the 25th, that's our deadline nationally. Those are non-disaster related hazard mitigation grants. There's some elevations, I believe, some acquisitions of West Pittston and others throughout the Commonwealth. Those may be the solution. I think what you're hearing from the Colonel right now is, we may not be able to make the levees any higher than they are. And that may be a reality of life. That may be what we can do. So.
I have a question up here, I apologize. Hi, my name is Rose Weaver, and I have a property in Hanover Township. Currently, I have the preferred flood policy, and I pay close to $500 a year. If the zone changes to Zone A, it'll be over $2,500 a year. I happen to sell insurance for a living, so I know that. So I don't know, how can you prepare for this, even in 4 years? It would be huge.
And that's what I've said, and that's one of the things that why FEMA, as required by Congress, we're doing this affordability study. It's being conducted by the National Academy of Sciences, and we're going to look at this. And the reality is, after the Bigger Waters Act was signed into law, there was concern all over the country when the subsidized rates went away. And I understand what you're saying, ma'am. You're saying, I can't afford that. And a lot of people have said the same thing. That has to be looked at. The question is, what is the balance point